Before we conclude for this evening, as we know that tonight we are marking the shahadat of, obviously all of these shuhada were given their lives on the day of Ashura, but every night we commemorate one of them.
We also have $550 from Sister Rihanna. And $500 from Sister Rabia. Sorry for interrupting.
Yes.
$500 from Suzina Zulafkar from lady side. And we are now done. Allahumma.
So as we said that every day that we be gathering together, remembering one of the shuhada, as we know though, that all of these shuhada gave their lives on one day, and that was on the day of Ashura. And today, for these last couple of minutes that we have left, I want to remind us of a young man who gave not only his life, but he gave everything that he had on the day of Ashura for Abu Abdullah. When we look at the shuhada of Karbala, it's again difficult, if not impossible, to grade them and to say one is better than the other or one is higher than the other, because at the end of the day they all sacrificed for Islam on that day of Ashura. But when we focus on Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam, a man who, as I mentioned this afternoon in the majlis, that not only was he there on the day of Ashura, but he was actually, we could say that he was actually created for the day of Ashura, because we know when Amir al-Mu'mineen lost his dear beloved Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, and he went to his brother Aqil to find him a wife, a woman that would give him strong boys, strong men, especially those that would be there to support Abu Abdullah. That Aqil pointed him to the tribe of Bani Kilab, and a particular woman whose name was Fatima. A woman who, although bore the same name Fatima as the mother of Imam Hassan and Hussain alayhi salam, the same name as the mother of Zainab alayhi salam, the same name as the mother of Kulthum alayhi salam. But when she would come into the family of Amir al-Mu'mineen, she would tell the commander of the faithful that don't call me Fatima, because I hate for your children. I hate for your children to hear the name of Fatima and remember the legacy of Fatima the Zahra alayhi salam. I hate for your children to hear the name Fatima and for them to remember Fatima Zahra, how she was attacked, how she had her rib cage smashed, how she had the miscarriage of Muhsin. And so from that day forward, brothers and sisters, Amir al-Mu'mineen would call her Baneen. Baneen meaning the mother of the boys, even though she didn't have any children up until that point. But it was as if it was a premonition from Amir al-Mu'mineen that one day you would give us boys, that you would have boys that would lead my son Hussein into battle on the day of Ashura. And indeed that is exactly what happened on that day of Ashura. On that time when Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam is looking around and he sees all of the companions have given their lives, all their bodies are near the tent, where he sees the Banu Hashim, many of them have given their lives. He goes to Abu Abdullah, he goes to his master, and he says to him, Ya Sayyidi, although they were the brothers of one another, but we know from historical points that Abu Fadl Abbas would rarely, if ever, call him by his name. He never called him Hussein, he never even called him Akhi or my brother. He would always say, Ya Sayyidi, Ya Mawlaya, Ya Abu Abdullah. And a day comes where Abu Fadl Abbas says to Imam Hussein, he says, Ya Abu Abdullah, Ya Sayyidi, O my Imam. He says, I can't deal with these munafiqeen anymore. I can't deal to see what they've done to our family, what they've done to your companions. He says, give me the ability to go and bring these people to their end. And what can Abu Abdullah say? What can Abu Abdullah say or do in this difficult time? He tells Abu Fadl Abbas, he says that why don't you go and try and give some admonition. So Abu Fadl Abbas, at the first time he goes towards the enemies, he says that the children need water, the women need water, allow us to get a bit of water. And as he makes the plea to the enemy forces, they reject him. And he comes back to the camp, he tells Abu Abdullah what's happened. Abu Abdullah says to me, he goes, Ya Al-Fadl Abbas, if you need to go towards the battlefield, then you hear the children in the tent screaming, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. You hear little Sakina screaming for thirst. You hear the children asking for a drink of water. He says, if you have to go, then go to the tent and tell the ladies that you're going towards the river, that you get some water for them. At least go and get some water and bring it back. Brothers and sisters, it's that point that Abu Fadl Abbas mounts onto his horse, and as he rides towards the battlefield, as he has the bag of water around his neck, the empty bag, that he tries to go towards the river. As he makes his way towards the river, towards the tributary of the Furat, the books of Maqtal mention that he's able to kill many of the enemy soldiers and disperse many of them. They must realize that although he's going towards the water, that they probably realize that he won't have even enough energy to get back to the tents after getting the water. They finally allow him to break towards the ranks. He gets to the river. As he jumps off of his horse and he goes and he puts his hands into the cold flowing water, that same water that the horses would drink, the same water that even the dogs of that area would drink. Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam puts his hands into the water. He takes up 2 hands full of water, and as he's about to raise the water to his lips, he throws that water back into the river, and he says to himself those lines of poetry where he says to himself, "Oh Abbas, how can you drink water while your master Hussain lies thirsty? How can you even think of drinking water when the women and the children are thirsty in the tents?" He says, no, this is not the way of my religion. This is not what I've been taught. As he throws that water back in, he picks up his water flask. He fills up the flask with water. He fills up the flask with water as the enemies look on, and he mounts back onto his horse with sword in hand and water bag around his neck. He turns the horse to go towards the khaymagat, towards the tents. And as he's going forth, the enemies begin to regroup. The enemies begin to realize that if he makes his way back to the tent, that will give the camp of Abu Abdullah, whoever is left, the energy to complete the battle. That will give them that last push to be able to continue the battle. And so the cursed Umar ibn Asad Mal'un, he tells his enemy troops, he tells his soldiers that go and attack Abbas, go and attack the water specifically. As Abu Fadl Abbas slowly makes his way back, as the enemies begin to surround him, he valiantly fights in the way of Allah. But obviously at one point it becomes too difficult. The difficulties of the day of Ashura are too much for him. The heat of the day of Ashura, the fact that he hasn't had food or water for the last 3 days is too much. As he begins to make his way back to the camp, there's a palm tree that he walks beside with his horse. An enemy jumps out from behind the tree, and he takes his sword, and he strikes Abu Fadl Abbas. And once the right hand of Abu Fadl Abbas falls onto the ground, Abu Fadl Abbas, still on his horse, losing his left hand, now losing blood, he begins to painfully move forward. He tries with the sword in his left hand to block any more attacks. As he moves a bit forward, the books of Maqtal mention that another enemy comes from behind another palm tree. He comes out and attacks Abu Fadl Abbas. Abu Fadl Abbas is now hit on his left hand. His left hand falls off and it lands on the plains of Karbala. Abu Fadl Abbas still has one opportunity. He still has the bag of water around his neck. And as he's bleeding from the right hand and from the left, as he's bleeding from the rocks and everything that the enemies are throwing at him, eventually the enemies begin to surround him. Umar ibn Asad gives that command again for Abu Fadl Abbas's water to be shot. And as Abu Fadl Abbas is on the horse, one arrow goes through the air. The one arrow begins and it pierces the water flask of Abu Fadl Abbas. As the water begins to pour out of the bag, as the water begins to leave, Abu Fadl Abbas realizes that the promise he made to Sakina and the little girls, that he would bring water back, that their uncle would bring water back, is not going to happen now. As Abu Fadl Abbas is wondering what to do, another arrow comes. That arrow pierces Abu Fadl Abbas in his chest. As Abbas is now feeling the pain of the arrows, a third arrow comes and lodges in the eye of Abu Fadl Abbas. But Azadar Imam, that's not the end of the tragedy of Abu Fadl Abbas. As Abu Fadl Abbas is on his horse, he's got the arrow in the water bag, the arrow in the chest, the arrow in his eye. And as the enemy becomes closer, one enemy of God comes with a pole, the kind of pole that they would use to hold up the tent, and they smash Abu Fadl Abbas on the back of the head. The books of Maqtal mention that the skull of Abu Fadl Abbas splits. He falls off of the horse. But he doesn't fall off of the horse in the normal way. He doesn't have the hands to break his fall. He doesn't have the right hand to break his fall. He doesn't have the left hand to break his fall. Historians said Abu Fadl Abbas falls on his face and his chest onto the plains of Karbala. The arrow that was in his chest begins to push deeper and deeper into his chest. The arrow that is lodged in his right eye begins to go deeper and deeper into the skull of Abu Fadl Abbas. Eventually, as he falls onto the ground, he lets one last appeal. He says, Ya Akhi al-Hussein, Akhi Abu Abdullah adrikni. Oh, my dear brother Abu Abdullah, come to the aid of your brother. The books of Maktal mention that Imam Hussein, he goes so fast as an eagle as flying through the wind. He reaches Abu Fadl Abbas. The enemy soldiers begin to disperse. As Imam Hussein sees his brother in that state, he takes the head of Abu Fadl Abbas. He takes his head in his lap. He tries to wipe the blood away from his eyes. And once Abu Fadl Abbas is able to see with the very last breath in his body, he sees his brother Hussein with him with his head in his lap. As Imam Hussein picks up Abu Fadl Abbas to try to take him to the Khaymaga, to take him back to the family, Abu Fadl Abbas says, oh my dear brother, he says, don't take me back. I can't bear to see Sakina in this state, that she'd asked her uncle to bring her a drink of water, and that even that Abu Fadl Abbas couldn't do for his niece. And in that situation, Abu Fadl Abbas, Imam Hussein puts the body of Abu Fadl Abbas on the ground. He goes back to the tents. He goes back to the tent that Abu Fadl Abbas had, and he takes the main pole from the tent and he throws it down. The tent comes falling down to the ground. And with that, the women and children realize that Abu Fadl Abbas is no more, that Abu Fadl Abbas has also given his life on the day of Ashura. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيُّ مُنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Martin Abu Fadl Abbas.
Ya Abbas, 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 Ya Abbas.
आया है अलम और अलमदार नहीं आया, 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 आया है अलम और अलमदार नहीं आया। हल्का बना ले, हल्का बना ले, सीधा करें हल्के को। आया है अलम और अलमदार नहीं आया, 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 ओ दरिया से दिले हैदर करार नहीं आया, और दरिया से दिले हैदर करार नहीं आया, आया है अलम और अलमदार नहीं आया, आया है अलम और अलमदार नहीं आया। ओ एक तीर लगा मश्क पे और बह गया पानी, ओ एक तीर लगा मश्क पे और बह गया पानी, और घोड़े से गिरा जीन पे असवार नहीं आया, और घोड़े से गिरा जीन पे असवार नहीं आया, आया है अलम और अलमदार नहीं आया, अलमदार नहीं आया, आया है अलम और अलमदार नहीं आया। ओ गैरत का तकाज़ा है अलमदार की हस्ती, ओ गैरत का तकाज़ा है अलमदार की हस्ती। ओ बच्ची से शर्म सारे वफादार नहीं आया, ओ बच्ची से शर्म सारे वफादार नहीं आया। ओ आया है अलम और अलमदार नहीं आया, आया है अलम
और अलमदार नहीं आया।
ओ बाजू जो कटे दांतों में मशकीज़ा उठाया, ओ बाजू जो कटे दांतों में मशकीज़ा उठाया। ओ नज़दीक कोई शेर के एक बार नहीं आया, और नज़दीक कोई शेर के एक बार नहीं आया। आया है अलम और अलम। या हुसैन
या अब्बास, 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 बड़ा शुक्र। या अब्बास, 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 या अब्बास,
या अब्बास, या अब्बास, या अब्बास, या अब्बास, या अब्बास, या अब्बास।
सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। आ गई शाम अलम, लुट गए अहले हरम, रेत पर जलती हुई हो गया ठंडा अलम। गुस्सा देने के लिए, उनसे मिलने के लिए आ गए बाबा अली, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। जब रिदा सर से चीनी मैं सदा देती रही, तू ना आया गाजी। आ गई शाम अलम, लुट गए अहले हरम, रेत पर जलती हुई हो गया ठंडा अलम। गुस्सा
जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी धूप में दूध शजर तुझसे आबाद था घर बरना मेरा सर क्या नहीं तुझको खबर है रमज़ान वफा देखने को बाखुदा से डरा से बड़ी नाया गाजी जबरदा से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी धूप में तू था शजर तुझसे आबाद था घर बरना मेरा सर क्या नहीं तुझको खबर है रमज़ान वफा देखने को बाखुदा तुझसे डरा सी बड़ी तू ना आया गाजी जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी जबरदा सर से छीनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी क्या कहूँ शेख